She was winning 6-1, 3-0, and then her opponent couldn't even stand up anymore. Lightning in the sky, a racket smashed in frustration, a medical timeout, and then silence because the match everyone expected to be a battle turned into something nobody saw coming. But here's the twist that most headlines are getting wrong. Stick around because by the end of this video you'll understand exactly what really happened on that court in Cincinnati and why what Eala did before the retirement might be the biggest story of her entire tournament. If you love following Eala's journey, hit that subscribe button right now, tap the notification bell, and let's get into it. Eala walked into the Cincinnati Open as the 17th seed, and for the first time in her career, she was stepping onto this particular stage, Cincinnati, a WTA 1000 event, one of the biggest tournaments on the entire tour outside of the Grand Slams. She had earned a bye straight into the second round, which meant her tournament opener would be against an opponent who already had a win under her belt in Ohio. That opponent was Elena Ruse of Romania, ranked outside the top 70 in the world but never someone to underestimate. Ruse had just knocked out Magda Linette of Poland in straight sets to punch her ticket into this match. And there was history here too. Back in 2024, Ruse had actually beaten Eala in the US Open qualifying rounds, coming back from a set down to deny the young Filipina a spot in the Grand Slam main draw. So this wasn't just another second-round match. For Eala, this was a chance at redemption. Now, before we go further, let's set the stage for where Eala was coming into this tournament, because the context matters more than most people realize. This wasn't a player limping into Cincinnati hoping to survive one round. This was a player riding one of the hottest streaks of her career. She had just won her first WTA singles title in Washington. She had pushed all the way to the fourth round of the National Bank Open in Toronto. Depending on when you're watching this, she had won somewhere around 8 of her last 9 matches on North American hard courts. In other words, Eala arrived in Cincinnati as a genuine threat, not an underdog hoping for an upset. And from the very first point, she looked like it. The match began at Tony Trabert Stadium 3 at the Lindner Family Tennis Center in Mason, Ohio, and it started with both players trading early breaks, a sign that nerves were in play on both sides. But by the third game, Eala found her rhythm, held her own serve, and grabbed an early lead. From there, she simply took over. She swept through 6 straight games to close out the first set, 6-1. Clean hitting, sharp movement, and a level of composure that made it look like she had played on this court 100 times before, even though this was her tournament debut here. And she didn't stop. She carried that momentum directly into the second set, ripping off a run that stretched to 9 consecutive games, won across both sets combined, and surging out to a 3-0 lead in the second. At that point, this wasn't a competitive tennis match anymore. This was a demolition. But then, everything changed. After the third game of the second set, Elena Ruse called for a medical timeout. She sat down, and the physio went to work on her right foot, taping it up as tightly as possible, trying to buy her body enough support to keep competing. If you've ever watched tennis for more than a few matches, you know exactly what a moment like that means. It's rarely good news. In a sport built entirely on quick direction changes, explosive sprints, sudden stops, and constant pivoting on the balls of your feet, a foot or ankle problem isn't a minor inconvenience. It's often the beginning of the end. And just as Ruse returned to the court trying to fight through the pain, the weather turned against her too. Dark clouds rolled in over Mason, Ohio, lightning was spotted near the venue, and officials made the call to suspend play entirely. Players, staff, and fans had to wait it out as rain and thunder shut the tournament grounds down. Now here's where the suspense really kicks in. When play was suspended, Ruse was still technically alive in the match. Down a set and 3 games, sure, but tennis has seen far bigger comebacks than that. So the question hanging over Cincinnati during that rain delay was simple. Would she come back out and try to fight, or was this the end of the road? When the courts were finally cleared as safe and officials prepared to resume play, the answer came. Elena Ruse was not returning. She had retired from the match due to that lingering right foot injury, unable to continue. And just like that, Eala was through to the third round of the Cincinnati Open without having to hit another ball. Now, let's talk about how this actually got reported, because there's a version of this story floating around online that isn't fair to either player. Some clips that circulated after the match showed Ruse's visible frustration during the second set. A racket coming down hard, the kind of moment that gets clipped, captioned, and turned into a narrative before anyone knows the full picture. And based on clips like that alone, it would be easy to jump to conclusions and say she simply gave up because she was losing badly. But that is not what happened here, and it's important we get this right. This was a documented, medically confirmed retirement. There was a medical timeout on record. There was visible taping and treatment on her right foot. And multiple credible outlets covering the tournament, along with the WTA's own reporting, confirmed the retirement was injury-related, not a case of a player simply walking away from a bad scoreline. Frustration and injury are not mutually exclusive. An athlete can be angry at her own body failing her in the middle of a big tournament and still be genuinely hurt. Those two things happen together all the time in professional sport. So let's actually give Eala her due here, because the real headline of this match isn't how it ended. It's how she played before it ended. 6 games to 1. 9 straight games won across 2 sets. A 3-love lead in the second set of her Cincinnati Open debut, in a WTA 1000 event, against an opponent who had already beaten another seeded player to get there. That is not a fluke. That is not a player who got lucky because her opponent happened to get hurt. That is a player who was completely locked in, dictating every rally, controlling the tempo, and giving her opponent almost no room to breathe from the very first game. Speaking after the match, Eala reflected on how she felt out on court that day, saying she was playing well, feeling the ball cleanly, and staying fully focused and in the zone throughout. And when it comes to how the match ended, she made sure to send a message of respect to her opponent, saying that nobody likes finishing a match through a retirement, and that first and foremost, she wanted to wish Elena Ruse a speedy recovery, because injuries are never fun for anyone involved. That's the kind of sportsmanship that tends to get lost in highlight reels but says a lot about who Eala is as a competitor. She didn't celebrate the win by dwelling on the circumstances. She acknowledged the disappointment of an unfinished match while still being clear-eyed about the level she had brought that day. Now let's talk about what this win actually means for her tournament run, because the ripple effects go beyond just one match on the schedule. With the win, Eala advanced to the third round, essentially the round of 32, of her very first Cincinnati Open. Waiting for her there is a massive test, 9th seed and world number 10 Anisimova, who cruised past Turkey's Zeynep Sönmez in straight sets to reach that stage herself. That is about as difficult an assignment as you can draw in the third round of a WTA 1000 event. A genuine top 10 player who has been in career best form. But if Eala's run through this tournament and the weeks leading up to it are any indication, this is exactly the kind of matchup she's been building toward. Because remember, this result didn't happen in isolation. This is a player who has been quietly climbing the rankings all summer. She had already picked up her maiden WTA singles title in Washington. She had gone deep in Toronto. She's now working her way through her first ever Cincinnati main draw with a statement win. And every one of these results is stacking on top of each other at exactly the right moment, with the US Open getting closer by the day. In professional tennis, that kind of momentum matters just as much as raw talent. Confidence compounds. Winning becomes a habit. And every match played at this level, even one that ends unexpectedly, adds another rep of high-pressure experience that a young player can draw on when the stakes get even higher. There's also a broader point worth sitting with here, something that goes beyond just this one match or even just Eala's career. When a match ends in retirement, there is always a temptation online to reduce it to a simple headline. Player retires. Instant reactions follow, verdicts get passed in comment sections, and the actual story, the injury, the medical timeout, the effort that came before it, gets buried underneath. But the responsible way to cover a moment like this is to look at the entire picture. There was a documented injury. There was medical attention on court. There was an official statement acknowledging the retirement was health-related. And most importantly, there was a dominant, high-quality performance from the player who won, one that stood entirely on its own merits regardless of how the final point was ultimately decided. So if you're a fan of Philippine tennis, or a fan of the sport in general, here's the real takeaway from Cincinnati. Eala didn't back into this win. She built it point by point, game by game, from a slow start in the opening game all the way to a commanding two-set lead that left her opponent's body unable to keep up with her level. That's not luck. That's form. That's a player peaking at exactly the right time of the season. And as she now turns her attention to a top 10 opponent in the next round, with the US Open looming just around the corner, this match in Cincinnati might end up being remembered less for how it finished and more for what it confirmed, that Eala is not just competing with the best players in the world right now. On days like this one, she's dominating them. So here's the question for you. Do you think Eala has what it takes to make an even deeper run in Cincinnati against a top 10 opponent like Anisimova? And what did you make of the way this match against Ruse played out? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And before you go, if you want to stay updated with everything happening in Eala's tournament run, the wins, the tough draws, and everything in between, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and give this video a like so more fans can find it. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.